welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Sebby.
And with me, Robbie. Oh, you threw me a little curveball.
I did there.
Yeah,
I changed my name. It's normally with me, Seb, and with you, Robbie, but this time I decided for Sebby. I don't know why.
I don't know why. That's
it confused me for a second there as well. That's the things I throw at you.
Well, to do it as a segue, it's been a confusing summer that is now officially over.
Yes, our summer slasher
season has come to an end. And we didn't really have much of a summer, did we?
No.
Disappointingly. So we thought that we would hit...
Those in the UK.
Those in the UK. I mean, everywhere else was probably glorious.
We had a nice last week or two, I'd say, maybe we're better than the first couple of weeks.
Maybe. But we thought we would return to our video nasty section, which we haven't done for a little while.
No.
We've got to put it on hold for a little bit. I think the last one we did might have been the burial ground, maybe. The one where the zombie bites a tear, I think.
No, tear. I was going to say, the recent ones we've done, Eaten Alive, Burial Ground. Oh no, it was Cannibal Holocaust.
Yeah.
I think it was Cannibal Holocaust. I think. Might be wrong.
Go and check them out.
Anyway, it was Cannibal Holocaust. Lots of people have checked that one out.
And speaking of Eaten Alive, that's a good segue again into the film that we're going to be discussing today, which is 1981's The Funhouse.
The Funhouse, yes, but directed by Tobe Hooper. And this 1981, known as Tobe Hooper's, it was his first ever theoretical, mainstream studio film after the Texas Chainsaw Massacre got picked up by mainstream. Often known for doing a mixture of kind of more indie stuff and kind of high level. And we've said Eaten Alive, we've done Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
We did Eaten Alive as well.
I think those are the three main ones that we've kind of covered with him. I think.
Well, we did Poltergeist.
Oh, and Poltergeist, that's the other one.
Yeah, we did Poltergeist, we did Texas Chainsaw, and we did Eaten Alive.
Yeah.
And I think this film, you could definitely tell the difference between Texas Chainsaw, Eaten Alive, and this. I went into this. It's a film I've wanted to watch for a little while. So when we decided to go back and do the video nasties, I was pretty much like, yeah, this is what I've wanted to watch. It sounds pretty good. The other video nasty that we're going to be covering in a future episode, I'm a big fan of the film anyway. And I was like, yeah, I've wanted to check this one out for a while, and I expected it to be much more in that kind of low budget, gritty, not particularly I'm not saying this is a massive budget, but you can tell that this does have much bigger sets, much bigger production values than Eaten Alive, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, just looking, so the budget for this film was $3 million, which wasn't a bad little number for back then.
Nice little earner
for 1981. So, and you can somewhat tell there are some quite big sets and animatronics and things in this film that kind of show off. The box office for this film was only 7.8 million. It was a disappointment, and it was a mixed critical film. And it's also a film that I think does not, if you've seen the poster, for instance, not the standard one, the most well-known poster for this film is the one with the clown on.
Yeah.
Which is an odd poster. It's the only poster that I knew for this film, and from that poster, I was expecting a completely different film than this film is.
I was, and it's really interesting because I'd seen what the killer looks like. However,
okay.
I hadn't put it in this film. Yeah. I saw pictures of what he looked like, but I was thinking that's a completely different film. It's not Funhouse. I was thinking murderous carnival clown.
Yeah. That's what I mean. To be honest, the whole layout, the whole way this film plays out, was completely different. And I guess with Tobe Hooper, we should have expected it wasn't going to be your standard slasher.
No.
But it is a really, I don't know, there's something really odd about the structure of this film for what it's kind of sold as, from what even its summary of its plot about, a bunch of teenagers who, go to a carnival kind of thing at night. The whole log line, I think, which is one of the log lines for the film is you pay to get in, you pray to get out.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And to be honest, a lot of that doesn't really match with what this film ends up being when it gets into it. This film is actually quite there's quite a lot to the plot of this film before we even ever get to a kill in this film.
Yeah.
Like, it's quite long. I think I've got it somewhere in my notes as we like build into it, but it's quite a time before you ever even get to your first kill in this film, and it doesn't match at all what you're expecting. Now, the other poster matches a little bit more closely
with the dribbling teeth,
with the one that looks like semen coming out.
The picture taken from your personal
house, all right?
Yeah. But going kind of to what you were saying, it's so the runtime is 96 minutes, and it takes them about 40 minutes to get in the funhouse, and that's not even where the kill comes in. I had the exact same thing you had. I was like, this is going to be like Tobe Hooper, this is going to be some strange clown freak similar to Judd in Eaten Alive, where he's kind of, he's got this weird carnival and he's killing people, and it's got to be straight off the bat. It's interesting because so he did Eaten Alive, and I just read that had a $600,000 budget.
Then much more indie.
Then he did Salem's Lot, the TV series, and then he came back to this.
Yeah, I always mistake that Salem's Lot is a TV series. It was made as a TV series, not as It was made as a TV series. I always think Salem's Lot was the film.
Same.
Because it has a sequel, which was a film.
Yeah.
But it has a TV series for the actual original kind of story. So it was an odd one. But yeah, I guess that makes sense why it's taken so long for him to get back to a mainstream studio kind of film.
Yeah.
And this film does not feel like something... It definitely doesn't feel like something the studio would have asked for.
No.
It definitely in many ways... once it gets into it, it feels very much like a Tobe Hooper, Eaten Alive, Texas Chainsaw in some ways.
Yeah.
But definitely for a portion of the first half an hour of the film, it felt more like a John Carpenter film to me than it did like a Tobe Hooper film.
It was very I don't know whether I would say it was very character driven.
Yeah.
Because you kind of you're introduced to the main character, who I'm going to check the cast list, who is Elizabeth Berridge as Amy Harper. She has a boyfriend called Buzz, which just made me laugh because it's so out of place for the character. And those two, and two of their mates, and Amy's little brother, who's obsessed with horror, go to the fair, and that's the first 40 minutes of them walking around just seeing fair stuff.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. It's an odd little kind of play that it has. Now, before we go fully into the plot of the film, I to go to the video nasty. Now, this is obviously our video nasty. It's probably one of our favourite kind of features that we do.
Them. I fucking love them, man.
Delving into that deep and dirty. If you haven't listened before, I mean, we've done quite a lot of episodes on it, whole ranging, starting with Last House on the Left, and building through to things like Evil Dead and Eaten Alive, and
Nightmares in a Damaged Brain. We've done a lot of and Snuff,
and Cannibal Holocaust, and I think there's a few others mixed in there as well. Obviously, the only one we did, Texas Chainsaw, would have fallen into that category as well, but we didn't do it as a video nasty. But we did do Tobe Hooper's Eaten Alive as a video nasty previously. So we've already been in this category of something that's quite a gritty, grimy kind of film that has some quite controversial elements about rape and things like that were in that film. Now, in terms of this film, though, did this film feel like it was of that level of a video nasty for you?
It was, I mean, for our British listeners are probably aware, and our continuous listeners probably are, but for new listeners who are going to obviously hit the subscribe button and leave us a lovely review, get that cheap plug in there. The Video Nasties were like a list of 72 banned films that were banned for stuff like, sexual violence, extreme graphic gore, kind of, themes that might have been pushing the envelope a little bit. And this film, I don't think, hit any of those. No. I was kind of like expecting that.
Maybe one slightly gory scene that I kind of picked, and apart from that, that was it in this whole film. And even like nudity in this film is somewhat, obviously we'll get into the scenes a bit more, but yeah, there's very few. Now, the interesting thing about this film because I did not research the video nasty before we chose this film. I'd always wanted to see it, and that was purely based on the poster. So how I feel about this film after feeling that it's a case of, it's kind of like the video nasty, a case of mistaken identity.
Yes.
What makes this film interesting in terms of video nasty is the fact that it's the one film on the list that they believe was mistaken for another film, and it's the wrong film went on the video nasties list.
Yeah.
And the other one basically was never released out of there. A case of mistaking a length. So I think we'll expand on that a little bit later.
We'll tease you.
But this film does not feel graphic in nature, and to be honest, there is another film out there that used as one of its titles was also The Funhouse, and we'll talk more about that film. But that one sounds like a video nasty, and if you watch it, you might be a bit like, well, this isn't that full on. This isn't that like graphical, gory. So in terms of video nasty, to be honest, for this film specifically, there's actually not as much to talk about as there is about another film. But you can see why certain things like maybe could have got it onto this. The director probably alone was the name that kind of went,
probably.
Oh, he did Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he did Eaten Alive. I think,
put him on
bang
the
him on the
bang
list.
him on the list.
Which is why he may purposefully be put there purely because they were just like, well, it's Tobe Hooper. So
Tobe Hooper.
Get
him
on, man. But there's a little bit of argument for why someone else might have necessarily been the one that should have been there.
Should we jump into the film?
Yeah,
because the thing that kind of caught me straight off, and I imagine it caught you, is the opening. Tobe Hooper's always kind of had a very interesting and a bit of like a dark sense of humour, and I feel like this film opens up with. It's not a rip off because they're kind of doing it very tongue in cheek, but it effectively opens up with Halloween and Psycho had a baby.
That's what I said Carpenter before, maybe Hitchcock as well. It opens up with that point of view shot, doesn't it? It has basically what ends up being her little brother. We find out is like into the house looking around. We get boobs.
You get tit, of course.
You get tit like straight away again. So you've got some nudity shown off, but nothing gratuitous.
Yeah, nothing gratuitous. Just breasts.
Breasts in the shower, which is as 80s slasher film as you could get.
Yeah, you've got to expect breasts in the shower. Nobody showers with their top on.
It has some really cool features in the room though. She has like the one thing that I did like, which we get shown at the start and we get shown a little later when they go into the funhouse. The animatronics of the kind of the dolls that you get in the opening credits, the whole big. You do get clowns and
Universal monsters,
bigger ladies and monsters and stuff, and they've all been done into these little like animatronic dolls, and I thought that was the weird part of the thing. Those were the creepiest things in this film. I thought those like animatronics that they did with these dolls that look kind of lifeless and soulless, and in her bedroom you have like a one on the wall, kind of like almost like a little clock on the wall. Yeah, but it's got like a puppet on it.
It's the little boy's bedroom, I think.
Is it a little boy's bedroom?
Yeah, because he loves horror movies, doesn't he?
But I thought he went through that room in order to go to the shower.
I don't know.
That's why I thought it was her room, because you go like we follow it into the room and then into the shower.
She never mentions horror movies.
It's weird because the room is filled with horror movie posters and all that kind of stuff, so it would make sense, but it's just the fact we do follow it through the bedroom into the shower.
Yeah.
So it's like the little boy has the shower in his room. I don't know. It's all maybe it's just so that they can show some cool shit on the way through.
Probably. It's an 80s house, They were built different, man. And then, so it kind of like has this slow build, basically, where you get a couple of pieces where Amy's saying like, me and Buzz are thinking of going to this carnival, or maybe we're not going to go, and her dad's like, well, stay away from it because when it came through, this like neighbor town, they found like 2 dead kids, after it had been.
It was one weird. I found a little bit of straight from the beginning, the characters, the interactions didn't always feel natural. No. They felt really like the father's one in that bit you just said felt really weird exposition that comes out of. It felt like it came a little bit out of just like nowhere. He does this whole like quite long little like tale. Suddenly, is like retelling her this whole story, and you're just kind of there like. I mean, thank you for telling us, I guess, is the point of why you've just said that. Like, I'm sure she was aware of it. It was
weird, he looked at the camera and said...
It literally was almost like a 4-4 brain. Basically, the plot of this film relates to this plot. And, there were two teenagers murdered by the Carney folk from years ago, and they never know what happened to them, but they disappeared, and we know they were dead, and all this stuff that he's telling you, and you're just like... Okay.
Yeah, it's weird he looked at me and said my name at that moment, it was very weird. I mean, that was odd, wasn't it?
I just found it really odd, the whole interaction with her parents and stuff like that, like between the exposition to just the general, like, it seemed awkward and a bit like, they're not really your family, are they?
These are your family.
What's going on here, kind of thing.
Yeah, it didn't feel very natural. But then I think that's true of the kind of a lot of it. I think they get, because basically the first 40 minutes of the film is just them going around a fair, and I was
character stuff, and
they lay some bits and pieces, like they go to see some like some fairy kind of like fortune teller character, and she basically says some real creepy shit. They smoke a little weed. The brother kind of like sneaks in looking for them.
Yeah, we've got... I mean, in terms of... The weird thing is, like, when you have the first 40 minutes and there's no death, and it's not unusual, even say, Halloween takes a fair time to get into it before we get the death. We get a death, obviously.
Yeah.
And we get the implication of spooky things and suspenseful things. But that's kind of what makes the difference. One, in that film, we get somewhat, with some of the characters, a little bit of character development.
Yeah.
We also get some suspenseful kind of tension-based scenes. And I felt like for the first 40 minutes of this film, we were lacking in the actual, where's the actual horror of this? Because it doesn't seem like it's really building much in terms of suspense or horror, apart from the one guy that's dressed as a Frankenstein,
and they're like, oh, he's kind of weird.
He's kind of weird, and apart from that, but there was no like real like tension. There was no like real like terrifying moments of like I'm looming over you, or someone's really really watching you, or things like that. No,
the only two bits I feel that were kind of important in that first 40 minutes is they go into like the freaks of nature exhibit.
Yeah,
and they show like a cow with two heads. And like a dog with like a dog with two dicks or something like that, and then they show the kind of like fetus in the homunculi, and one of the guys is like, oh, he bit me or something like that, and they kind of show that, and I guess when you watch the film later on that makes sense, but at the time thinking this has got to be like a murderous clown, I was like, that's just
when's this clown coming about? I guess it's one of those that your expectation, but I also don't think in terms of like say plot summary and stuff like that, it helped either. Like I feel like this film was sold as something that it wasn't. Very in theme with the video nasty being mistaken identity. But I mean, I think it's fairly obvious from the fact that I sat there and I've tried to make notes about this film, but there wasn't a lot to make notes for in that first 40 minutes, to be honest. It's a bunch of teenagers, they go around a thing. There's not a lot of character development for anything. I feel like I don't know them any better from the second they walk in that carnival to when they get to the point when stuff kind of starts happening. The boyfriend's a dick. A dick to start with, and then later on they seem to be really pushing that he's not.
He's not a dick.
Which makes you question why they made him seem like such an asshole to start with, because it just kind of ruins the character straight away, because the first moment she gets into the car, he's just a real prick about like not listening to her parents and like basically like tell them to not listen to her.
Yeah.
Like acting like she's not really his boyfriend, it's like their first date.
It's kind of weird, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is kind of unclear, and then they pick up the two friends and there's nothing different to them. Like you've got Richie, who
looks like Bob from Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, he does, and a little bit like, is it Bob from Halloween?
Yeah, he's got those kind of big ass framed glasses.
He's of that time.
He's of the era.
And then you've got you've got his girlfriend, who you kind of look at as if she's probably going to end up naked at some point in this film.
Yeah.
She isn't, but it looks like she's the one that's basically there to be that. but in terms of actually finding out much more about them, we don't. We just follow them as they occasionally kind of act like stupid teenagers go around, even though, again, this is a horror film, but they don't look like teenagers.
No.
But apart from our main character, Amy, the rest of them kind of look a bit older than her, and they all look like it's like a 18-year-old with a bunch of 30-year-olds.
Yeah.
And it's all a bit odd. Like there's no moments where we really get to see long parts of them talking and stuff like that.
No.
They're on this day. The bit you mentioned about being with the fortune teller, and they're just sat there and they're just giggling
high
and things like that. Absolutely high. She's trying to get her fortune told. The fortune teller is also who becomes our first victim of the film a little bit later on. But even I was sat there kind of like, alright, like she's trying to do this, and I'd be like, this is bullshit, but you're just sat there continue laughing at her and laughing and laughing. Are you surprised when she's like, fuck you kids?
Respect the mysticism, you know?
If you're going to do it, then don't let it sit there. It's just there like, you're just sat like, alright, but you're high and it's hilarious that she's doing it.
But then you also get other things in that 40 minutes that don't really go anywhere. So you get like, there's a weird old woman in the bathroom who's basically, the two girls are talking about shagging, and the old woman's like, God's watching you, God's always there. And then she disappears, and I'm like, oh, it's the crazy old woman who's gonna die. She just disappears. You get some, I don't know if you spotted him, but there's some like weird guy walking around and he's covered in like blood or shit and he's really dazed.
Yeah.
And that doesn't go anywhere. You get like a random segment where you have like a vampire or like a magician dressed as a vampire, and he looked like David Gordon Green. Yeah. And you're having to watch his show, and I'm kind of like, are you making like a horror movie, or are you making a documentary about people who go to
like carnies and things? Yeah, I mean they've all got that kind of, we've got a little bit of the kind of implication at times of a folksy kind of maybe inbred.
Maybe, yeah.
And that show you said has a little bit of horror because it has the fake out of the killing the girl in the, oh no, we sliced her head off kind of,
we stabbed her in the heart. She's dead.
That kind of thing. And I think, but it's very obvious where that's kind of like going, but people in the audience, it does create a fairly like, we feel we are at a carnival, and we feel that this is a very like folksy kind of one. It has scenes where like the head of the carnies are kind of like is making a big call about going in here and watching this, good. And the girls bit that it leads to kind of.
Yeah, the good bit is when he's talking about the funhouse.
Yeah,
and he's like, there's a bit of foreboding and kind of a creepiness where he's saying about like, enter into the funhouse, but be careful once you come in. You're never going to leave, and he's looking at the main character, and that's kind of a bit like, that's a little kind of creepy, and it's a bit of that foreshadowing. But couldn't we have had like 20 minutes, and then they're like, let's try and stay out all night on the funhouse, instead of half of the film and then let's stay overnight? Because
it's got a bit of a, like I said, like until they get to the carnival, it all felt like a slightly kind of different style. Yeah. And then the second we got there, it felt a little bit more like, okay, all of these carnies, this would all fit exactly into Texas Chainsaw's world. Yeah. Or Eaten Alive. Like, I could see how these guys. And I guess the thing is, like, when you have both of his previous film had been about basically where actually there's more to this community than you think, and actually a lot of them are involved, or a lot of them are part of it, kind of thing. Yeah. That was a thing that happened in both Eaten Alive and Texas Chainsaw. And there was a part of me that was like, okay, we're setting up all these like random carny characters because I assume they're going to all play a little bit of a role later on, and we're going to find out that they hide everything or they keep everything hidden. That's me kind of wishing for more of a bit more Texas Chainsaw, almost that, a bit more of that brought into that, because I felt like this really would have worked really well. This actually really would have. This is, I guess, the sour is that this felt like it was going to work really well as a slasher kind of thing. Like they're trapped, and the rest of the carnies are all in on the fact that this is actually
that's what I was thinking.
You know what I mean? And sadly, that's not really what we get with this film. But yeah, and as I said, we still get a lot of those what feel Hooper-ish, if you can define him down to a thing, because he's a bit all over the place at times as a director. Yeah. Sometimes he's really feels like that. And I think that's when he does stuff that's his own, and it's, if anything, half the time when he's not doing studio stuff, Hooper feels more effective when he's just left to just make stuff up on his own kind of thing. When he does more studio stuff, it can sometimes be a bit more of a mixed bag of some of it works and some of it really doesn't, the kind of thing. Like, I felt Eaten Alive worked better than I expected it to.
Yeah.
We know Texas Chainsaw is an absolute classic because it's just his ideas down there. But when we've seen ones like here or Poltergeist, for instance, which I also thought was a bit more of a mixed bag of what seemed like him and what didn't seem like him. Even Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which I know you really like.
I really like.
And I thought was,
I also really like
good.
Life Force as well.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. Actually, no, I haven't seen that one.
But those two feel more like I find it really interesting. You have the part of Tobe Hooper from, Texas Chainsaw and Eaten Alive where he's doing these kind of like gritty things. And then Funhouse and Poltergeist seem to be where they've kind of like tried to rein him a little bit. Yeah. And then Life Force, Invaders from Mars, and Texas Chainsaw, they're all very kind of like, just fucking do what you want. And they work. But the one thing he does, and he does well, and I thought would play out slightly more in this, you're talking about the carnival people, is when we get the one kind of thing that he does quite well, and he did in Texas Chainsaw and Eaten Alive, is the kind of like real kind of deranged, almost like bumbling idiot killer.
Oh yeah.
Leatherface, Judd. And in this you have, I don't even know what his name is, but the Frankenstein man. We'll try and find a name online. But he's that kind of like weird, deranged guy. And then similar to how you have, like...
Dwayne Dobber as Gunther Twimbert?
As Gunther then.
Gunther, who is the monster.
Well, but his dad, the one who's kind of doing the call-outs for the Funhouse, he kind of feels very much like the cook. He is this kind of character. He's quite dominating, and he's like shouting at Gunther, and he treats him, even though Gunther's like a killing creature, who's more than capable of killing some old man. He's very much like dominating him,
Yeah.
Because
not in a fun way.
Not in a fun way either.
I totally get. Tobe Hooper has an amazing quality of taking these characters, making them psychologically scary and somewhat grounded while also being over the top.
Yeah.
He's got that weird mix of you feel like it could happen, but they also seem eccentric characters.
Yeah.
Which is perfect for this. Like, this is like perfect, like, for his kind of style. So it is a little bit weird when it's suddenly like, you're not really delving, apart from the father and the monster, they're pretty much all we really get after once we get into it. Which is odd. I mean, this to be fair, this wasn't written by Tobe Hooper. This was written by Larry Block, who I don't
Mr.
know,
Block.
and I couldn't find much more on him. So it's
I'm gonna have a little
it's
research.
an odd little kind of. It's not totally kind of, and to be fair, he doesn't write a lot of his kind of ones, but I guess he brings it through in his style. He didn't write, for instance, Eaten Alive. He was a major part of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So he's not always doing that, but this one just felt like it wasn't totally him.
Yeah.
Like, and whether I couldn't find much about like there being major problems with this. It didn't felt like he was very much kind of just left to it. Like, here you go, do it. So we can't really say that there was majorly studio interference and stuff like that. But I guess, I mean, it is still weird and it's still odd. It's very odd, I guess maybe he thought that his vision for this. What I would say is, as much as like certain things, if you look through his cinematography, he has made probably things that have been more poorly received than he has made things that have been well received.
Probably, unfortunately.
He is a very mixed bag as a director. We've said previously that we do think, in the Poltergeist episode, we did talk for a while about how we did feel that at times he seems like he kind of got a hard time of it. But we've also said how at times people have said that he's not the easiest director to work with.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that kind of like, if you're going to act like that, then people aren't going to give you the opportunities. And if you have films that are a fake, if this is his first one back to a studio one, and then it doesn't do very well, it makes people offer you less things.
Yeah.
And he got offered, say, Poltergeist because more because Steven Spielberg kind of thought he was fantastic with some of his previous films, so he gave him the opportunity to give him that let, and then that kind of didn't quite work for him either. So yeah, it's an odd one with a director like this, where I think a lot of people know his name, but how many of his films they've actually seen is another question. Because there's like outside of the real big studio, like known ones like Texas Chainsaw Poltergeist and stuff like that, I do find that there's a lot of people who's like, oh, I don't know that film.
Yeah,
and there's a lot I haven't seen either. Back to kind of one thing before we do finally somewhat get to it, and before we get into the Funhouse, is the I did like the kind of grittiness, which felt very Tobe Hooper, of the girls in the tent.
Yeah,
you know, you've got the whole like
a little peep show.
They're kind of peeping in, like the guys are like, hey, it'll be fun, you know, trying to sell these girls. It'll be fun to look at these naked women.
It'll be fun to watch us.
Funny, guys.
Watch other naked women.
It's like, yeah. And then when they get there, the guys like basically like cut a hole in the tent, and they're just like, we're watching, and they're like, we want to have a look. It's like, we said it would be fun, but we had no intention of you actually watching. We're just here to watch.
It reminds me of that peep show. It's Always Sunny bit where they go to the mountain, and he's like, "Oh, it's really funny. We'll look for the holes that the women shower in." And he's like, "Oh, what's funny about that?" He's like, "Then we stick our dick through." It's like, "Oh, what's funny about that?" You know, it's kind of like that.
It's that like 80s, whatever it is, like Porky's or like those kind of films of the 80s Animal House. Where, you know, they do stuff like that, and like then you go into today's context and like, why flashing someone your dick?
Why did I find that really funny?
Which is really odd, because actually saying that now, and I'm like, what's probably one of the most common things that happens on apps nowadays? Someone flashes their dick.
Someone flashes dicks. But at least now in person, and even, you know, like now, if somebody flashes their dick, you're like, that's really weird. Imagine if everybody was like, oh, somebody just sent me a picture of their dick. Oh, they got me.
Yeah. That's what I mean. It played up as that kind of funny part. And this, I guess, which is something, it's like, oh, I'm going to peep through it, I guess, which is something as well. It's probably died out with the fact that you can access porn at any point in your life.
You don't have to go to a carnival.
If you want to see someone naked, then it's basically on your phone. So you don't need to be like, I never get to see porn. Yeah. I can't get any of the dirty mags from the store, so I need to go and peek through like this. You know, that'll risk
cut a hole through a tent with my knife.
Yeah, I don't want to pay to get in, and it's for 21 and over. Apparently, it's only for the, I guess, drinking in America. I guess it's if you can drink, you can see naked women.
See naked women. So weird.
But it's odd. Like they're saying like about giving the whole. I did like Liz is obviously asking Richie, like, let me see kind of thing, because Buzz has finally let Amy have a look, but Liz doesn't get to have a look, and she's like, she just walks up and goes like, oh fuck it, I'll find my own hole then, and then she literally stops for a second and goes, can't believe I've just said that. Which I thought was a legitimately funny line. It seemed very off the cuff. It almost felt a bit like the actress had almost said it. And then
and that was like, why
did I just say that?
Yeah.
Like, it's just the way she said, like, I'll find my own hole.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of that look of like, I bet you will.
And then
she finds the hobo. It's like
the old man beaten off.
Yeah. I don't know if he was beaten off, but in my head,
obviously he was.
In my head, again, that was like that bit of OTT on Always Sunny there, but it was like that one when they walk out and just in the alley, the old man's just like whacking it while he's just staring at it. You can just hear like
you can hear the placard.
It was a bit like that in my head of just like they find the old man and he's like, you don't need to be looking at it, like he's telling them a lesson while he probably
he's beaten off.
But then we go on to get finally after about 40 minutes to start getting about half an hour in.
It's about 40 minutes plus.
They finally get onto the ride, the Funhouse.
Yeah, and they
go past the creepy Frankenstein.
Yeah,
you know, who we find out is the monster just in disguise.
Yeah.
They go through the ride and they're a bit like, oh, okay, this is, you know, the animatronics are cool, as I said. The puppetry is quite like creepy. I think some of them, not all of them, but you know,
but there is a certain creepiness where. Because they decide that we're going to spend the night in the Funhouse. Some other guys did it, so why don't we do it? And they all call their parents in. I'm staying at this guy's house, that XYZ. The little boy, the brother, sees them get on the Funhouse, and then they jump off and they hide. And the carts come round and Frankenstein sees they're empty, so they close the Funhouse.
The brother stood there.
Yeah. And he's like, they've obviously gone in.
Yeah. It looks like it implies he was stood there the whole time and they never get back off, but he's just kind of like, yeah,
I've stood here for 45 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just gonna walk off now.
I'll just leave him. And then there was a slight creepy bit where everything gets shut down and the animatronics kind of like shut down and just freeze. And that's a little creepy. And I was thinking, all right, is this where things start to? Are we going in for a really creepy film now?
Yeah.
And then they basically hear Frankenstein and the mystic downstairs, and they're like in the basement, and Frankenstein's trying to pound, and he pays her like $100. She keeps saying like, no, I need more money, I need more. He's gone non-verbal. And eventually, like, she lies down and she starts beating him off, and he nuts real quick.
We're talking like 30 seconds.
Yeah, which is the perfectly normal time to nut, I'm sure.
For his what is implied to be his first nut.
Well, it's supposed to be maybe his first nut.
He's from another woman, so yeah, it's a very odd. Like, I was like, okay, so the Frankenstein dude's getting jacked off, or he's meant to have sex with her, but actually
he nuts early.
She just jacks him, and it's like, well, that's what you paid for, and he starts getting wound up and a bit crazy, and he's acting a bit like Frankenstein's monster, kind of waving his arms around, and like, oh, you know that kind of special way.
Goo is flying everywhere,
and then he ends up. Well, he chokes her to death, doesn't like? Yeah. He gets her down onto the bed and chokes her to death. They're up above watching. So again, there's this sudden weird kind of like, and this is, then you're like, okay, oh god, like, is he going to start chasing? Like, they're going to make a noise. But and I have got it on my notes that it was pretty much about 50 minutes when that death finally actually ended.
Yeah,
50 minutes into a horror film that's only 99 and your first death is just happened, and it's not like a.
It's not a video nasty death.
It's not like it's not like a scary. It's not a gory kind of death. It's a she kind of gets. It doesn't even like fully like show every part of the choking kind of. It's just kind of. It's not that dramatic. Yeah,
death,
it is. And then you think, okay, so. We're about to find out, who's at there, and then his father, the main announcer, Carney, comes back in, and who is pretty much
Kevin Conway.
Yeah, Kevin Conway. He's pretty much just called the freak show announcer / this announcer / this.
Conrad Straker is his name, and I get that because he did.
He's implied to be the daddy,
Dracula, and
he's our main monster freak daddy.
Yeah, his freak daddy.
His freak daddy.
I'm just checking to see what else. He did a lot of on Broadway stuff.
Yeah, I thought I recognised him as a kind of Tobe Hooper regular or something, but then I couldn't find much more that kind of showed up about him. But yeah, so this is the kind of odd thing about this film. You're really expecting it to back up. Now, obviously, if we talk about some of these films, like Texas Chainsaw, for instance, is not the gory film that a lot of people think it is. A lot of it is more in your head.
Yeah.
You think you see a lot more than you actually ever do in Texas Chainsaw, the original. But it does psychologically have a terrifying tenseness to it.
It's very tense.
And it has some scenes that are just like, they don't need blood and gore to make you feel absolutely disgusting. You know what I mean? But this is kind of lost it. We have this scene play out with the father, and it's kind of like watching a play actually, because it's like watching two people in one room go back and forth with each other. Yeah. One can't verbally speak. The dad's doing all the acting, but again, it feels like we go on for another 10 minutes of these two characters in one room, basically like, what you've done? Where's the money gone? Where did the money? It turns out that Richie snuck down and taken the money and things like that. And we have all this kind of build-up of like, they're going to want him back now because Richie has the money and he snuck down to take it while they weren't looking and things like that. You've got all these kind of tensive things, but there's no horror happening here. It's all very like, how it all depends on how much. And obviously then we get the reveal of the monster. Yeah. Which is not at all what I expected.
No. So apparently, I'm reading the Wikipedia. So Gunther's face is revealed to be gruesomely deformed via albinism and frontal nasia dysplasia, with protruding teeth, long white thinning hair, red eyes, and a cleft running up to the bridge of his nose. I mean, just Google the Funhouse Gunther. And he looks so out of place in this film.
He does it in my head. I was like, okay, it's a bit like a more over the top Jason or somewhat Elephant Man in the kind of the
I had vampire.
Yeah, and then it does, and then I that was my first note, and then I did start saying there is an unhuman vampirism to this design.
Yeah,
I gotta be honest, the design for me doesn't work. It wasn't really a scary design that I expected. And it was too. It's very obvious. Like, it somewhat took me out of it as well. Like, I was trying to get into it, and it almost further took me out because I didn't find it scary, and therefore I was like, if the monster's not scary now, then where's the horror coming from in this film?
And it's weird because the guy who did the special effects was Rick Baker. And we've spoken about it before when he did, in the same year, 1981, he did An American Werewolf in London, but he also did the kind of werewolf creature in Michael Jackson Thriller. He did a little bit on, like, The Exorcist. Like, if I'm looking through his...
He's got... I mean, Rick Baker's such a huge critic.
Yeah, Videodrome.
The Grinch.
The Grinch, yeah, The Grinch. All sorts. Rat Boy, Harry and the Hendersons, Gorillas in the Mist... Batman Forever, Escape from LA, The Frighteners, Men in Black, your favourite film, Psycho, Wild Wild West, your other favourite film, Nutty Professor 2, The Clumps, your other favourite film.
My most favourite film.
Your most favourite film, apart from Norbit, obviously, which you also did, your most favourite film. So he did like a lot.
Prosthetics and stuff like that, he's a huge, like, well-known kind of source of things. You went from showing that he's like a master to then starting to be a bit like he'll do anything.
He'll do anything. Norbit.
So I don't know where the intention of this design came from. But it does somewhat look like, yes, a vampire mixed in a bit with Jason in his original form kind of thing. Like deformed but with vampirish teeth and kind of like haze and then slightly with the eyes and stuff like that. It's very odd, and my major problem here is that one, obviously, there are many factors here to why this might not be the film that we expected. Now, Video Nasty, we expected this to be a kind of Tobe Hooper, kind of maybe a bit full on at times. You know, what is actually going to happen to these kids when they're stuck in this carnival?
Yeah.
What kind of disgusting things might happen? Like, Video Nasty does give you somewhat of an expectation as well, yes. And then the poster, which I've already talked about, gave me an expectation. But it's also that kind of losing feeling of how this film has the perfect setup for a horror film. It has a setting, it has the carny folk, it has weird things, it even has slight deformities which could have been played into it as well, you know, underneath thing. And yes, I wanted to see a clown because I was promised a somewhat killer knife wielding clown on the poster of the film, which was the original poster, which was released mainly in cross cinemas, so people were expecting to see a killer clown film.
Yeah.
But it's also the fact that when they are in this, and I've got no problem with taking time to set up characters, which they don't quite do, but it's when they're inside this funhouse, which is also an amazing setting to be chased through, because we do then get, after this, we get a kind of chase through the funhouse. You know, and it's an amazing place to be hidden, to have to go away from, different locations, different parts of it where you're like thing. But to be honest, it would have been so much scarier if this was more of an actual slasher and we had someone being chased, and that with the idea that, you know, kind of in that Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of way of, even if you get out of the house, you're still not safe. No. You know what I mean? Like, even when they're stuck in the house in Texas Chainsaw and some of them have to get out, you're like, but the problem is, you're not, everyone else is kind of part of this.
No.
You're in a community where you're not necessarily safe. You know what I mean? You're in a family that you're not necessarily, you don't know who's part of them and who's not. And it's the same with the carnies outside. That, for me, in one way makes me think, if there is anyone who makes films, try to remake the Funhouse. Well, remake it in the style somewhat of Texas Chainsaw Massacre with the Carney family and the slasher, you know.
Well, there's actually a film called Dark Ride, which is from 2006. And it's there was a shop in town that was selling like films that were like free for $5, and I picked it up thinking it would be like absolute dog shit. And it was basically what you're describing. The first 20 minutes, the characters find this abandoned or this random dark, you know, like funhouse ghost train ride. They go in it, and there's a deranged killer in there, and you get really gory kills that come thick and fast, and it's all set within there. And I was like, when I heard about the Funhouse, and I was Tobe Hooper, Video Nasty, I was like, so this is going to be like an 80s version of Dark Ride, basically.
Yeah.
And it's so, I mean, this film is just so tame compared to what I expected.
It really is. There are even scenes where I'm like, oh yeah, you're going to kill him like that? Oh no. Okay,
no,
you're not going to kill him like that.
Like, so, for instance, because basically once that happens...
I mean, this is the thing. They get chased from location to location. Not much really to talk about apart from basically...
the deaths.
Richie's death is the first one that comes.
Yeah.
His is fairly cool. I kind of liked it. You know, he's kind of just stood there, and suddenly down comes a rope and basically like hooks him around the neck, a noose, and pulls him up.
Yeets him off.
And I thought, okay, actually, out of nowhere, that was kind of cool.
I thought that was a cool one.
Yeah, and then obviously he's then hatcheted in the head, kind of thing, which we don't. Again, we get to see the hatchet kind of afterwards. We don't fully see.
No, what happens is he gets tugged off, but that's what happened in this film. He gets hung and snatched away, and then there is quite a creepy scene where his body is put on the cart going through.
Yeah.
And as it's coming, we know it's Richie. They don't know who it is. They put an axe into his head.
Oh yeah,
and he
of course
goes
they
on.
do. Yeah, I have mixed that up. Yeah, I remember him going through the thing, but I thought he already had the hatchet in his head. But no, they do it afterward, don't they? Yeah.
And then his girlfriend, who is for some reason one of the characters that also has a last name, Liz Duncan. She runs after him and
falls down. She gets taken down a
trap door. And I was like, okay, kind of cool. And it's teased that, you know, she's going to... She's also in Jeepers Creepers 2 as Woman in Car, in case you wanted to know. That is Largo Woodruff. Kind of a little funny Easter egg for you. And there's a creepy-ish scene where then Gunther is kind of like closing in on her as she's in this, like, tunnel. And she's trapped with a fan behind her. Yeah. She's got a prop knife, and she's basically saying like, "Oh, you want company? I'll suck you off." That kind of stuff, you know. And then
she's doing anything she can to get, you know, this very inhuman looking
creature.
That's a bit. He looks so inhuman. Is what makes it not scary to me. Is the fact he just looks so like big and out there. But this was the scene I was just mentioning. This is the one. You've got, you know, the giant fans behind her, and it's teasing us. It's teasing us with this big gory death. Because you've had a bit when Amy is like screaming out to her parents through one of these big
fan
fans.
It's cutting her
it's one bit that leads a little I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. Because Amy's against the thing. She's screaming for her parents out there. Now this, first with Amy, I was like, oh, okay, someone could come behind you right now and just go boom into it, and that would be fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And I was like, but you're the main character, so that seems less likely. And then suddenly, when Liz was in the vent and she's right near another set of them, basically like seems like underneath like Amy, I was like, okay, you're going to do it to her instead then. This is exactly the death. If you're going to put him by a giant metal fan that's spinning fast, what are we all going to expect? What do we get? I don't know, because it basically cuts off. It cuts off.
He's like clawing her.
Yeah, she gets like clawed to death basically.
But then we
don't really see it properly. She gets one claw, and I think, and then it kind of looks like she's kind of somewhat strangled / clawed.
And it's weird because if you look on the Wikipedia, and maybe there is in some strange universe a director's cut of this, but it says on the Wikipedia that. Obviously she stabs him with a dagger, and it says here that he kills her by pushing her head through the exhaust fan. Sounds badass, but he doesn't do that because later you see her body and she's just clawed.
Yeah, I think someone has misconstrued that scene because she's not actually close enough to it.
No, somebody's been watching the film and was like, oh, a fan, I know what's happening.
You definitely see his hands go around her neck at one point as well as clawing. And then you see her clawed body later on. She was strangled / clawed when they were first fighting. She's clawed when they're fighting, and then he gets hand around her neck, and then it kind of cuts away after that.
Yeah.
That's what... I'm certain that's right, and it wouldn't make any sense for it to be anything else, because the back of her head or anything is not disposed or damaged or bleeding.
Yeah.
So there's no way she went to that fan and that's how she died. I don't.
No.
I think that is a Wikipedia miss.
Yeah.
I think someone needs to go on and edit that down to.
Well, I'll do it now.
There you go. You will edit it and change it. But it's just another one of those things. With this film, the expectation is there, and it doesn't go to where you want, and it doesn't go to where you really want to go. And I'm just surprised that Tobe Hooper didn't want it to go there either. Like, who doesn't want a little bit of a bit of bloody gory like beheading?
Yeah, and now you've got the budget for it, man. Like, I can't remember exactly what it was, but we were talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Go and check out the episode, and we mentioned that like part of it was like funded a little bit by like the mafia, by like porn films, and I think he had something like 100,000 or something. And you think if you get 3 million and you get Rick Baker at his prime as well, probably you're going to be like, let's do some fucking nasty shit. Not just a prosthetic
head that looks bad
and a homunculi.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like it is quite disappointing. And I guess this is why. When I came to this film, when I kept seeing this film, I was like, how have I never heard of this film?
Yeah.
How have I never heard of a film about this? Like, a film about a killer clown that goes into film that's directed by Tobe Hooper. That sounds like it should have been an absolute, like...
hoot.
If not a hit, then it should have been a cult classic. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, a big one. And now we understand why. Because it's not so much... I don't think it's so much a forgotten gem as it's a very
film.
Yeah, it's a forgotten film because it's very it's mishandled. It doesn't seem like it knew exactly what it wants to be.
No,
it's
it's overwhelmingly average and surprisingly tame. Like we get
the fight at the end with Buzz and the father,
and that's cool. He scraps Daddy. He pushes Daddy onto the sword,
spear,
onto the knight's sword or the spear or something, and that's cool.
And he gets pulled into it as well. So I thought, that's kind of cool. He gets somewhat. It looks like he gets quite.
It looks like
it goes pretty deep into his gut.
I thought
somehow a minute later he's
fine.
Okay.
But then Gunther turns up, and you're like, here's another scrap coming.
Yeah.
But Buzz dies off screen, and please. For the love of all that is good, especially in horror, save off-screen deaths for like first act. Yeah. When we're in the finale, don't give us an off-screen death.
We want to see
one of the most important characters.
In general, I gotta be honest. Off-screen deaths is something that always niggles me with horror films. To be honest, I understand it if they're going for a slightly tamer horror film, which is again, I guess, because we didn't expect to take a horror film. I guess this is one that Tobe Hooper was really trying to appeal to maybe a more like mass audience and didn't want to go full on with it, which is fine, but then don't make such a weird ass film then if you're going to go thing. The film we talked about was more of a mainstream film, I'd say, the slasher film, than this film is in its intention. It's just, it would have bored people, I imagine, a lot of this film, because I lost interest in portions. This is probably the first Tobe Hooper film where I've been properly like, I'm not into this.
I prefer Crocodile, which was his 2000.
We talked about that with Eaten Alive. I haven't seen that. To be honest, there's a large list of Tobe Hooper I kind of need to check out. But I guess some of the mixed bag that I'm starting to get as I'm going away from Texas Chainsaw is starting to throw me off. But not Eaten Alive. Eaten Alive I thought was class.
Yeah, but I preferred Crocodile, which is his straight to DVD. Like bargain bucket, giant CGI crocodile killing people. That was fun. But this film, you kind of get to the end, and I mean going to because Buzz dies off screen, and then his body comes through in the arms of one of the animatronics, which is kind of cool. But I would have liked to have seen him be like mutilated and killed, because he doesn't look. He looks as if he's just had his head bonked. He doesn't. There's no blood.
He just looks like he's lying there, kind of thing, like
like
alive later, kind of thing.
And then you get
forgets the electrocution, doesn't he? He gets pushed into the.
Well, they have a scrap. They have a scrap. He chases her. They go downstairs into like the maintenance area, which makes me think, how big are these fucking things? Because it's like 3 or 4 stories.
Yeah, it's huge. The different, but like I said, like it's very cool the different places they kind of fit. And it feels like we're going around this funhouse for a good while in the film, obviously. It's called the funhouse, so the first half is outside, the second half is pretty much all inside of the funhouse. But I also think it calls a lot for this film that even like as you look at like summaries and stuff like that, like we've been just double checking with things on like we've got our own notes and then we double check other kind of places for summaries and stuff like that. But the fact that on most of them like this is a short paragraph for basically what is the main deaths of this film shows how kind of you're in this situation but how little actually feels like it happens. The deaths pretty much sum up what happens. I guess they come like one after the other fairly kind of thing. Kind of wrap up to that thing. And I guess, yes, it's faster as we get towards that last half an hour or so. But because it doesn't have enough impact, it doesn't feel like enough is there. So when we finally get to Amy and Gump for fighting, it doesn't feel like a big thing. Yeah. That whole push back and forth until he's basically pushed onto a generator. Yeah,
he gets electric wire on his back, he gets sparked. And then he goes into some gears. Yeah. And it crushes him. And it's tame. Yeah. I was like, oh, maybe he's got to get crushed in half. But instead, he's just, like ripped in two. But instead, he just goes in. It looks like it just crushes him.
Yeah, he's just kind of stuck between it. And like, dead.
And it's
and again the prosthetics don't work any better because it doesn't give enough space to show much emotion within it, so it kind of just looks like he's just still there. He could still be alive.
He could be alive. He could be fine. He's just sleeping with his eyes open.
And then it's off into the sunset.
It basically
and that's the funhouse. You expect maybe she's going to go over to someone thinking she's going to get help, or you see like shots of like walking off in sunset and all these people. Mum
and Dad.
I'm not saying she's going to trust a carny or whatever if she's walking off, but she seems she's off to pretend like none of this ever happened because it looks like she's just walking off. Like, that's fine. We're done.
We're done.
It's over. 3 of my friends, 2 carnies, a weird bat creature are dead, but it's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine. Walk off to the sunset. That's it.
Another day in Iowa.
Yeah.
And
all of these kind of films cut off like that, where it's just the horror's over. Goodbye. We're done.
Well, done.
Not all of them, but a lot of them we've mentioned before.
We mentioned that Starman, John Carpenter's Starman,
Yeah.
Just goes in, bangs and goes into space and ends.
Yeah, that's the end of it. We've mentioned that sometimes there's a bugbear that it feels like the story left there, which it doesn't with this one. I had no problem it being the end. But, again, it's just the fact that all that carny stuff was basically just left out of the door. Apart from these 2 characters that got, the father and our monster who got mixed up in a kind of, it's just happened, which you didn't expect it to be a sudden like, oh no, it's an accidental coming across someone murdering someone. You expected it to be more like
sadistic.
This happens a lot, or because they've even built the whole this happened 2 years ago. Or
the last town they went through, and the dad briefly mentions, why you try to shag an old bird when you can get, I could have sorted that out for you.
But that's what
and
it
they mentioned
like
about his brother. They mentioned like your brother, the homunculi, like he died and we had to keep you a secret, but I can't keep doing this. We have to do it all where, but it just doesn't feel. It doesn't feel particularly like sadistic. It doesn't particularly feel as if this. It just feels as if like. I don't know. It just feels there's no malice. There's no kind of spite there.
There's lacking suspense. It's lacking. It is definitely the worst Tobe Hooper film I've seen, and it just feels like there's a lot of ideas that are thrown out that seems good at maybe good at the beginning, and it never goes near it. As we were just mentioning about that, the whole either the carnies or the fact that this has happened in the past. But to us, the interaction we get between the father and the monster doesn't imply that this is something that happens all the time. It just implies that this one time it kind of made me think of Mice and Men.
Yeah,
the old, Lenny's done the old. Oh no, you've done the old bat. You've accidentally smothered this girl to death. Or but some kids have come across it. It feels a little bit like that. Trying to put within a horror movie, and he's a properly abnormal looking creature. But it leaves behind all the history and the fact that the carnies may have come. it's just, it feels like, you know, and I know you've mentioned like other films, and it's not that there's not been killer clown films or films at Carnival, you know, there are other films like that out there. But I don't know, there was just something about the idea of having Tobe Hooper, who's fantastic with these little small communities of horror.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Having him do this mixed in with them trying to survive, but maybe finding out there's more horror to it in past things, or even people are still like collected or kept, or all that kind of thing. It felt like you could have gotten. It felt like they ignored every single one of the best intentions of what could have been to do what would have been the least interesting of all of these options, including having an abnormal, you know, carny kind of creature who just seems completely out of place in this film.
It's weird
until we see him and we feel like he's lost.
And like, even talking about, like, I'm on the Wikipedia and I'm looking at some of the films, and an author, Tony Williams, in a book called Halves of Darkness, says about the Funhouse that it continues Hooper's exploration of the American family's repressive nature, and you know, there's some themes of that in Texas Chainsaw, and you know, we spoke about a lot of the themes in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which are great. There's even themes in Eaten Alive. You know, it's that film is very similar to kind of like Psycho in the terms of you have a hotel out in the middle of the nowhere, except instead of a guy who's kind of like mentally ill and obsessed with his mum, he's obsessed with a crocodile.
It's more redneck.
It's more redneck. But it's more Tobe Hooper, you know? And there's stuff there about like, well, how long do you just leave somebody to their own? What's isolation do to somebody? Yeah. Like, how long are you just going to be like, well, that's just weird old Judd, you know? And then you look at this film, and I'm not saying that you have to...
And both of those films also had high levels of kind of sexual themes, you know, sadistic themes, even, you know, themes like rape and stuff like that. Yeah. Were all very much there in the present. And the fact that this film feels very glossed, it feels sanitized to the point of terrible. Yeah,
and it's not, like, you don't have to polish a turd to look for those themes in this film, but I don't think that any of this stands out. It feels very much as if the studio said...
Only the carny bits, which I felt would have linked into the previous ones. All of the stuff, say, in that first 40 minutes could have turned into something fantastic for the last 40 minutes. But it does, that's the problem. It completely goes nowhere that you want it to go. And it doesn't have interesting characters for you to grip onto. It generally is just kind of... outside of some of the, like I said, the animatronic designs and some of the carny bits, which have, you know, it does create a kind of sense of a carnival, I think, in the weirdness of the carnival. Yeah. Those two bits are the only bits, for me personally, that were redeeming of this film. Like, this film, like, felt oddly off in so many ways. Yeah. I really didn't expect it.
No, I feel like you hit the nail on the head there, man. I feel like you have maybe like an hour of a film here, and it's basically the creepy bit where the guy's saying you'll never escape the funhouse. Then when they decide to get in there, and then there's about half an hour where they go, "Ah, shit, we need a story. Let's just film these people walking around." And I feel like if they, like you said, if you went into, well, you know, let's push this idea that the whole carnival are in on it. Let's do some sadistic stuff. We could have 40 minutes where things are normal-ish, and then things start to twist and turn on their head. But instead, you watch for 40 minutes, and then you're like, 40 minutes later, I'm finally getting the film that I paid for, and this is where the film should have started after about 15 minutes, because there's nothing there, man. No.
I mean, that's kind of our like summary of like the film. As we do with every Video Nasty, we kind of talk about the film, and we talk about those really stand out. Now, normally with a Video Nasty, we would have points where we were like, oh, that was gratuitously violent, or that scene was so uncomfortable, or that was disgusting, or we can see why maybe that made people sick, or maybe people say this is the most twisted horror ever made. And from listening, you'll have noticed that none of that was anywhere. This is almost the most sanitized film that I think could have ever made it onto this list, which is why at the start I kind of teased you with the fact that this is a mistaken Video Nasty. Yeah. Now, this is obviously not confirmed, because they do obviously watch the films and stuff like that, and it could be related, like we said, to the director, Tobe Hooper, just automatically after Texas Chainsaw and Eaten Alive both made it onto the list. They may have automatically just gone, this film was because there were some, kind of looks at, and it was kind of held back. I'll talk about how this film got put into that kind of category, where that kind of came to, when it got released and all that kind of thing. But the video Nasty. So the film that we kind of looking at. So the film that it got kind of mixed up with was called The Last House on Dead End Street. Yeah. Which also went after the title The Funhouse, with one of its titles. So this was a film that was unsuccessfully prosecuted as a video nasty in the United Kingdom a few years after its release. The BBC, the BBFC, sorry, not the BBC,
the BBC,
the British Broadcasting
Film Club
certification.
The British Broadcasting
I don't know why I've
Friends
said that
Club.
so many times on this podcast that I absolutely forgot. It passed the film, with an X certificate for this film, The Last House on Dead End Street. Some commenters, so that was obviously, that was The Funhouse. Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse. Yeah. It was unsuccessfully prosecuted. So they did, which meant, like, unlike some of them which we previously talked about, quite a few of them ended up getting some kind of prosecution. Yeah. Cannibal Holocaust, definitely.
We spoke about the legal
Snuff, definitely. And several of the others had points where they'd been stopped. Even, I believe, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is not one of them. Was one that kind of was really like banned. So it was kind of passed with exposition. So it did actually make it into cinemas. The Funhouse, Tobe Hooper's, and with an X certificate, which would nowadays to be an 18 certificate. Yeah. But lots of people have commented on the fact that why was this film ever on the list and why was it banned? As it's fairly tame, as we've talked about, and it's The Last House on a Dead End Street. So to give a summary of that film, and just to hear the difference of what you might notice here. The Last House on Dead End Street, originally released as The Funhouse, a 1977 American exploitation horror film written, produced and directed by Roger Watkins, under the pseudonym of Victor Janos. Now, when it's under a pseudonym, again, a lot of our films have sometimes had to go under a different name because they didn't want to be connected with how bad it was or how terribly received it was or things like that. The plot follows a disgruntled ex-convict, who is also played by the director, of course, who takes revenge on society by kidnapping 4 acquaintances and filming their murders in an abandoned building. This also includes themes of rape, murder, sexual exploitation, and all of these things. Yeah. So to give back to some of the video nasty, so that film, highly likely it's mixed up with the film board, is what a lot of people think. They mixed up. They saw the 100%. Funhouse and the Funhouse, and they thought that one, because the other one, the 1977 Roger Watkins film, was not really well known, not really noticed, whereas the Tobe Hooper film was studio, so it was highly kind of advertised. So they went and picked one saying, oh, everyone's talking about this film, but mixed it up with the negativity that was being talked about a previous film, The Funhouse. So this one was never really considered because it never actually really got proper cinema release. So therefore that's why it fell past. Whereas a lot of the video nasties, to give a bit of a history behind it, is a lot of them did make it into cinemas, but it's when they got to video. So video nasty, the term comes obviously because a lot of them got banned once they got to the video stage. Some of them were banned in cinema as well, but a lot of them, it was when they came to video, when they came to put on video, that they stopped the production and selling of it because they thought people or children at homes were going to get a bad idea from them seeing it with their parents or being able to watch it on any of those blacklisted ones. So, this film, obviously, The Last House on Dead End Street, was another one of the film, and we've heard this a lot with the video nasties. It was inspired by Charles Manson. Yeah. Originally intended to be a biopic of Charles Manson, but ended up turning into a low budget horror, probably because they couldn't get any rights or anything like that, because they were so low. And over 2 decades following the film's theoretical release in certain countries, the true identity of the director and cast were pretty much unknown to the public, again, under a pseudonym. This sparked various rumours surrounding the film. So this is a film that had, like we had with Snuff, where people thought, this
is real.
This could be a real deaths, and it emerged from because this came very much more like New York underground kind of cinema, so it was in cinemas, but more America, limited release in certain areas. And so any attempt, so when they reporters actually tried to find it, they said any attempt to trace the names behind Last House on Dead End Street will lead no further than the credits themselves. So none of the people on the credits were actually the names of which they were. So they'd gone basically under pseudonyms for everyone. So they had no idea who the hell anyone was. So they couldn't prove that anyone was actually, real or had lived. So they thought all of this is false. And they did finally manage to prove that the New York film student named Roger Watkins was the actual director and actor of this film. And a lot of this all came not until, we're talking 1977. A lot of this investigation didn't happen until the end of the 80s. And then in early 2000, a contributor on online message forums started to do a little bit of research and claimed, and it was actually the director himself who came forward saying, I'm actually Victor Janos. I'm the person who wrote, directed, produced this film, and he said, and I put it under the name Roger Watkins. And he went on to have a film in pornography.
Oh, of course.
Of course. Normally they either come from porn or they end up in porn. With a lot of these films.
As is life. You either come to porn or you end up in that.
One way or the other.
Yeah, one way or the other.
You're spending your days looking at assholes.
That is true.
So, we may have to return to this somewhat forgotten gem and actually look at the actual film if we can find it.
Maybe.
Because that's a hard thing. But in terms of Video Nasties, all of the themes that are mentioned in there, this film never even got to the point of being released to be a video kind of thing. But it seems a lot of all of the negativity in America and other countries that was brought on from this film, and the questions around it led on to them thinking that this was the Tobe Hooper film. Back to the Tobe Hooper's Funhouse. So in 1987, the BFC passed the film for home media release. So it took about 5 years where it was banned.
5-6 years.
But the thing was, it was banned for media release, and it had an 18 certificate, which was then downgraded to a 15 certificate by 2007.
Yeah,
because they said there wasn't enough. There's a lacking of gore, blood, or many sexual themes apart from some nudity. And some
beaten off.
Or talking about deformity and things like that. Would have been part of that happened. And then so it did really it got released in cinemas. It didn't get it. Tobe Hooper's never got any cuts, which is the first case of any of the films we've covered not getting at least a couple of seconds cut off where someone gets something happens to them or a bit of gore, because this film is basically gore.
It's so tame.
Yeah, it's so missing in anything we've had from Video Nasty. So the fact that this film gets put on, and this film was on a lot of those Video Nasty lists that I look at and stuff like that, and I'm even surprised that people are still selling it within that, because this film does not match Video Nasties at all. This is
no, of course not.
I'm quite happy to go out there and say, because of maybe what we expect from a Video Nasty, and the fact that we've said before, we really enjoy doing these features, and it's because sometimes we have to watch films that we're not even completely comfortable with, and they take us out of our zone of comfort, and we've got our next Video Nasty coming up soon, and Tenebrae, and that completely at times has some of those themes that we would feel a bit more like, what is happening here? What's going on? Like, oh my god, that's so gory or horrific. Yeah. It has some of those themes in it. But this film is, not only is this definitely the weakest Video Nasty that we've seen. I think that reward went to maybe Snuff last time. I think was the one we said might have been. Yeah. I think we might have labelled Snuff as the weakest we've seen so far.
Yeah, Snuff.
This one takes over from that, because at least Snuff was. It wasn't amazing in many ways, but at least it was pushed, trying for something. It tried something. And it didn't work in all ways, but it tried, and it felt that it it felt truly a horror film. And this film borders at times on a low-level thriller.
Yeah.
With a deformed person in it. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of what plays out between him watching the father and stuff feels more like a thriller of like what's happened. If you took away the deformity, this would basically almost be a thriller if it didn't have the quick couple of deaths that come, but they're just tame.
It's a wet fart, man. You know, it's just
it's the worst Tobe Hooper film I've seen, and the worst Video Nasty. You know, one of the weaker films I've seen on this list because it's the weird fact that it saps out joy. Every time so it felt like it was going to come, it took it away.
Yeah.
When you're the person watching a horror film, you know, and you have it with some where you're like, oh, they could have shown that for longer, it would have been better, or they could have gone that way with it. And you know, you can't have everything, but it feels on every attempt of this one. It zaps that joy from you. You know, and the fact that a different film is the one that was more interesting to talk about, because that's the film that got mistaken for it. And again, maybe we'll come back to that film later in our Video Nasty segment. But that's it. You know, it just kind of let's walk off into the sunset.
That's it. It's just it's so forgettable. It's so kind of devoid of any grittiness. It's interesting because I find with Tobe Hooper, you either have something quite gritty and quite a bit like grimy and disgusting to watch, or you have something like Life Force, which is just balls to the wall fun. And the same with Texas Chainsaw 2. This is neither. And it doesn't have a foot in either. It's got a foot in some very bland studio executive just saying, look, if you suck my dick, you can make a very bland and banal horror film, but you'll get your foot in the door. That's what it feels like.
It has a weirdness, it has a weirdness to it, an oddness at times, but not in like a fun way. Which is the odd, it's almost like I could see maybe why Tobe Hooper was interested, but I can't fully see why he was interested in this one.
Almost.
I can see the elements of something that he would like doing, but it feels like either he hasn't gone for it, he's held back, or he's been sanitized or something from going where he would mentally like to go. And that's why I think also for people who enjoy these kind of stories about Video Nasties, this is the most disappointing thing for this episode overall, is the fact that this should never be or shouldn't have been a Video Nasty. To us, this shouldn't have even been an X certificate in the cinema.
No.
I don't understand that even to be honest. Even then it feels like it still would have been a 15. The only thing I can think of is probably the tent scene is the only thing that pushes any envelope. Is the one dealing with
tits.
I was about to say dwarfism. I don't know why.
That would have been
dwarfism. With the change of his him different in appearance and and the nudity at that one scene, where they're peeking through, is the only things I can think of in this film that maybe would give people like I guess we should call it an 18. But it definitely today, to be honest, this film would almost be leveling on. You could probably push the 12A, maybe cut out a couple of the nipples, and
you're 12A.
Yeah,
or pixelate them, But
PG-13 for Americans.
Yeah, I think it's just so bland, man.
Yeah. Well, we've wrapped up.
The Funhouse is appropriately the mid house. There's nothing there.
We will be hitting a little Friday the 13th on our next episode, and then we will be back to Video Nasties with Tenebrae.
So make sure you hit that subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. You subscribe, that episode or any episode is landing fresh when it's released. Come and let us know what you thought on the Funhouse. Are you a secret fan of this? I put something up on the the social media lounge, and you can find us on Twitter and Instagram at CMDH Podcast. But I put out that we were watching the Funhouse, and there wasn't anything. We have some backing music now, which I think actually said used to be a fun house, maybe.
There you go. It is indeed.
I don't know.
It's from our Instagram, where I was also checking for the social media, but I don't think anyone's seen this film.
No.
For me personally.
No, there is nobody there. But come and let us know what you thought of the film. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at CMTH Podcast. Take care, stay safe, and we will see you next week. Bye bye.